He's suggesting me no questions.
I
agree with him.
We have 3 or 4 questions, you know, for about 15 minutes. So,
fuck you, I really didn't want questions. I wanted just to be hypocrite and to be able to say I wanted, but sorry, please, let's go on. Okay.
Okay, any questions or criticisms or semblances, appearances? Yes.
I find your comment, your defense of buying into Jung and Holliday's figure of 35 million people ruthlessly killed in the Great Leap Forward unconvincing. The idea that Yang Yushen's 1,200-page book was not suppressed by the Chinese authorities as proof of its validity seems very unconvincing to me, because the Chinese authorities, after the Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping, and from that period on, made a veritable industry of victim literature from the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. And your own point about that we shouldn't accept our enemy's definition of himself, I think also applies that we should not accept our enemy's definition of their enemies. And no one was a greater enemy of Mao and the Cultural Revolution than Deng Xiaoping and the people who have stayed in power since then. It's such an important question, how we sum up the great revolutions of the last century. And we have to not be blind to their failures and shortcomings, but it's equally important that we understand what they really did accomplish and what their victories were. And to buy into these, what Badiou, I don't always agree with him, but in this case I do, is called hair-raising stories about massacres. To buy into that so blindly is I think, is a terrible mistake.
Okay, but now I ask you in a totally naive way. What do you mean that I buy blindly into it? I went to China, I spoke with people who are very Maoist. The ones who informed me about this are not some Deng Xiaoping revisionists, my God. Like Wang Hui and others and so on. I spoke with them and they admit it. So, I mean, it is at the rhetorical level, I agree with you. But please show me another set of arguments and so on. As far as I know, there were 2 attempts. I know the story here, you know, I'm not bluffing. There were 2, let's say, more official attempts to tell the story. One is by, I have his name, a guy who was, before this book, ordered to do an estimate of deaths. He came up to 17 million official one, but then everybody agreed, really everybody, that he simply lowered the number by taking into account only a certain very restrained official statistics. So, of course, and it's in those chaotic times, of course, the official statistics didn't work. Then you had one of those, who was that, the president of China just before Tiananmen, who was then set aside. Okay, that one. Sorry, he ordered a committee, and the idea was that, not the idea, I mean, you can read this in histories. He nominated a commission and, well, to put it bluntly, the results were so sad that the party buried it all. So, you know what I mean? I agree with you in principle, but what are you trying to prove now? What other sources do we have and so on? Why, what would be your counter-argument? Apart from this general idea, let's not believe the enemy and so on and so on. I didn't believe the enemies. I went to people like Wang Hui, who is now under attack by Deng Xiaoping, guys.
So we can move on.
Briefly, obviously I can't respond to who the academics that you talked to were, but some other sources. That Mobile Gao has written several books, both from his own experience in the Cultural Revolution, as growing up as a kid and doing research in the records, and also on the internet, summing up the talk of the various non-academics in the internet. Wang Zheng and others who wrote a book called Chinese Women During the Cultural Revolution, writing about their experiences.
Wait a minute.
And there's an article in the Monthly Review challenging those figures. But the essence isn't the number of people isn't the number of people who died whether it was 35 or 30 or 25. It's why they died, and to say that Mao and the revolutionary leadership that made a cynical thing: if we want more guns, let's kill 35 million people and let them die so that we can have the guns. Is an interpretation of
no,
what
this
was
is not
a
an
famine.
interpretation. What Wang Hui showed me is, sorry to disappoint you here, the minutes of the meeting of the Politburo was presented with, there will be great famine, and, sorry, this is unfortunately a fact, admitted by, and Mao said, oh good, I don't like people with great stomach, a little bit of famine, men will be, I mean, Mao was cynical at this level, you know, unfortunately, to disappoint you. There are numerous comments like that, which doesn't make Mao any bad, because I want just to correct you at another point. Wait a minute, you're not talking to a right-winger. Why do you mess cultural revolution? There, it's different. I didn't talk about cultural revolution. I think it was a terrifying but authentic attempt. I, in contrast to many others, totally stand for don't mess cultural revolution. I was talking specifically about the great leap forward. Cultural revolution is a different thing. As to Deng Xiaoping, things there are much more complex. I even like him for that. You know that I met guys there in China who were, some of them, they claim, close to Deng Xiaoping. And they told me a thing which, far from making him sympathetic, non-sympathetic to me, make him to me much more complex, maybe sympathetic. You know that upon his deathbed, that's the idea, Deng was asked, what do you think your greatest achievement is? And I really thought he would say, oh, opening up to market, blah, blah, blah. You know what he said? He said it wasn't this. He said, and this is interesting because people now have a misperception that, you know, the party majority, bureaucrats wanted Maoist order, the heroic Deng like Gorbachev. No, no. He said, so many people put pressure on me to go a step further and simply say, okay, communism didn't function, we drop it. He said that he considers his greatest achievement to resist these seducing voices and to say, no, 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 we may allow some capitalism, but the party stays in power. He considered this his greatest achievement. I don't think this can only be dismissed as cynical communist manipulation and so on and so on.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering, listening to you, if you could elaborate a bit more your understanding, your idea of Islam. Maybe it's because you were discussing secularism that you equated Islam with religion, and I wonder if that's...
Where did you get this? Because I spoke also of Christian fundamentalism and so on. Yeah.
But you could think of Islam as more than just a religion, but as a philosophy and ontology. And looking back to Cairo then, I was wondering if what we saw in Cairo, if a certain form of being that you see and hear having a Muslim society engaging in a kind of revolution, if it spoke to you as a source of new ways of thinking politics, an entire new ontology really of how we think revolution. And as an appendix then, where, because it was on the news today, now we've seen it, they've succeeded, yet the stock market comes in and it immediately crashed on the first day it opened after the revolution. What is the place of the stock market in the revolution we have seen?
It's a good question, but first let me tell you that, and I emphasized it, I am far from dismissing Islam and so on. I always emphasized, for example, for me, the same traumatic undecided attitude that the liberal West had towards Egypt event, it had also, I think, towards, for example, Mousavi, the Green Movement in Iran. You know, because on the one hand, they supported him because he was perceived as the same as this, you know, pro-Western liberal. At the same time, some people were skeptical, no, he is nonetheless still, but the point is he was neither. For me, Mousavi is, as I already said, even in this room, I think, Mousavi is a proof that the Khomeini revolution cannot be simply reduced to a hardline Islamist takeover. That it was a genuine also Islamic, but also social movement, and so on and so on, and that it took the hardliners 1.5 years to control events, to take over. So again, if anything, I'm not, as some idiot accused me, I think somebody told me again in Al-Ahram, that I'm inscribing Egypt in Western liberal dream. No, the whole point of my comment on Egypt, my gosh, was exactly what you said, the opposite one. This is what makes us so uneasy. It is a genuine democratic popular movement, but it's not that they want what we have. This is what makes us so uneasy. Or if you want to put it in speculative terms, Hegelian almost, they want democracy, if they want the same as we, they want it in a much more radical, authentic way than we. I mean, Egypt is now, in this fundamental sense, not institutionally, but in the sense of people's willing, more substantially democratic than Western countries and so on. So I totally agree with you, and I also agree with you, if this was your point, that of course I knew all the shit comes back. Stock market comes back, then of course this was what made me sad even more than stock market, that there were again some clashes between Copts and Muslims, because for me the absolutely sublime moment was that I think there was a mass on Tahrir Square where they were praying together, Copts and Muslims, and shouting, "We are one, Mubarak out," and so on and so on. Of course, all this comes back, but which is why I think the true battle is now. It's easy to have, they are cheap, basically, those enthusiastic moments, we all cry, all conservatives like them, you know, it's like every French conservative will proudly tell you, yes, in '68 I was on barricades, and so on and so on. I think the true battle is now, who will reappropriate the events. No, you will have pro-Western liberals who will say, oh, Egyptians in a confused way really want what we have. You will have others and so on. And now it's the battle. Now I think it's the dangerous moment. And here I'm absolutely not cynical. I think here we should even correct Marx. Because from a cynical Marxist perspective, you can say, oh, this was just the illusionary unity, now the reality will come. No, what happened now is a certain material social force, which, even if it will be betrayed in its institutionalization, will persist and hopefully explode again, the same as it did with Musavi there. I think genuinely that something new is emerging, which in these countries, which is neither some kind of Muslim nationalism, nor, but that's more crucial, nor simply joining the Western liberalism. And this is what makes it so fascinating for me. So no, I agree here totally with you. I just wanted to play a little bit the bad guy, because frankly, you know, it's the same. I like to be evil, okay? And for example, when I was in India, no, I was accused of being Eurocentric. Why? Because I mentioned the untouchables and equality, no? And I learned from top Brahmins that caste system is not so bad, I should concretely understand it, and so on and so on. And then, I don't know if I told you the story here, then funny things happened, no? Because after being in India, I returned to Slovenia. I think I told the story here. And then a friend from foreign ministry in Slovenia told me that Indian foreign ministry sent an urgent, how do you call it, depeche, official to Slovene foreign ministry, claiming that I said in India that there is no difference between Gandhi and Hitler, and is this the official position of Slovene government? No. I told them to answer, not yet, but we are seriously debating in Slovenia to adopt. Well, I didn't mean that at all. I only wanted, if you know the Indian situation, to oppose Gandhi and Ambedkar, of course, who is totally ignored and so on, but I think Ambedkar went much further in the rights of the untouchables and so on.
Okay, last one with
I wanted to say thank you for your excellent talk.
But, no, when you begin like this, you are already preparing the knife back.
I think I've been been coming to your talks for 18 months, and I think it's the best one I've heard. So I know.
I know. No, but wait for half an hour and you will get what we call post-coital disappointment.
I want to ask you about Miller and all that stuff. I'm really interested in this. What you're talking that he's some, because that history of his relation with Lacan, of course, is really interesting as well as a sort of separate story. And I've recently been looking also at your writing about Saussure and what Miller said at the time, in film theory. And what is interesting that he kind of, at the time, was like the heir apparent of Lacan, of course, grabbed all the seminars and started editing them. So my question to you is this, and I'm really interested in this because now I've since become a Lacanian too. Is whether there is something though symptomatic about what happened between Lacan and Miller, that Miller little by little has becoming more like a sort of dictator of Lacanian thought and become, as you say, extremely conservative. The whole movement is fractured. And is it something kind of though dangerous about that whole idea that somebody takes something over, then grabs hold of it, won't let go, and becomes really sort of dogmatic?
Now, you are talking to somebody who is secretly a kind of a Jacobin, no? So I'm tempted to say, even if this may disappoint you, that, let's not throw out with dirty water also the baby. For me, the problem is not that he is a dictator, but that he's a bad dictator. No, quite seriously. I really mean this, quite literally. My disappointment in Miller is that there are situations of confusion, let's be frank, when you need a guy who firmly sets certain rules. But my disappointment with Miller is that he has he's a little bit like Arafat. One of the things told about Arafat, a nasty joke, was that Arafat was a guy who never missed a chance to miss a chance, how to put it, no? And Miller also he runs his empire like a Jacobin dictator, nominating people to run different countries. And he had an incredible ability, according to my experience, to nominate the wrong people. And practically, for example, in United States, he ruined the movement and so on. But on the other hand, I totally agree with you that something strange happened in the last up to 10 years when, again, it's clear what you said. It's so sad, this, he played more political neutrality till 10 years ago, even with certain sympathies, at least for Mitterrand. But now he is openly on the other side. I know from Paris. Now, for example, look only at where does he publish his regular political comments. Figaro and Le Point. Center-right, directly. And so on and so on. I mean, he even joined the gang, socializing with them, of all those ex-nouveau philosophes, who are now his friends, Philippe Solers, Bernard-Henri Lévy, and so on, no? It's very sad, I think. He broke down at some point from good to bad dictator. Let me give you another indication. Up to a certain point, he published Lacan's seminars in this ascetic way, no footnotes and so on. No, you didn't notice because it's not yet translated, but maybe in France, his publication of Joyce Le Symptôme, it has 100 pages afterward and all the time of comments and so on. These purely narcissistic comments. I remember seeing Lacan here, he told me that, and so on and so on. Something broke in him, and it's very sad because to avoid any misunderstanding, my Lacan is still basically Miller's Lacan. I appreciate him immensely. He made Lacan readable to me. So I remain faithful to him, but I still think what he's doing in the last decade is a catastrophe. And a catastrophe not for my leftist ideas, but in the long term for psychoanalysis itself. I think that to inscribe psychoanalysis in this neoliberal movement, it's a complete madness for me. It's undescribable horror, for which, again, the price will be paid by psychoanalysis itself. It makes me sad here, no? And the point is for me to save psychoanalysis. No, it can function in a different way. But, you know, maybe, just to conclude briefly, what also interests me at this level is that maybe we should de-fetishize another thing. Maybe I mentioned it here that, you know, in France there was a whole obsession of this idea that a thinker may be oscillating in a crisis, but when he's close to death, he murmurs the ultimate truth, how should I put it, no? The whole Millerian reading of Lacan is directed in this way. Lacan on and on, l'autre, the other Lacan, and then at the end he saw it. He saw it what? Everything is a semblance, the real of jouissance, and so on and so on. And even, I don't know if you know this funny story. When I was in Paris, his last official mistress of Lacan, Catherine Millot, had a mythical status because the idea was that she was with Lacan when he was dying, and that before death, Lacan whispered to her some, you know, the ultimate wisdom of I don't know what. But what I'm saying is that, no, I think, frankly, and it's very tragic, Lacan admitted it, that I think Lacan's peak is somewhere dans Discours qui ne serait pas de semblant or Seminar 20, and that after that, when he approached the topic of the le neutre, knots, that this is a crisis. And it's very tragic because, my God, don't people read Lacan? In his very last seminar, literally, before he retired, in a tragic way, he openly said it. He said it, I tried, but I didn't see, it's a fiasco, I got it totally wrong, and so on. Namely, he tried precisely the problems I was aiming at. How to think the semblance, the real together, and so on. He thought the knot of the tree, imaginary symbolic real, would offer the solution. At the end, he had to admit it doesn't work. And up to the end, there was this problem which he tried to solve with the notion of symptom, like the knot connecting the tree and so on. And it failed. I think that Lacan ended in a tragic failure. I think, again, his peak was somewhere around that Logique du Fantasme and later up to Seminar 20. And then in Seminar 20, he saw a deadlock. And then all this last 5-10 years was a tragic fight to find a formula out of this deadlock, and he broke down at the end. It's extreme tragedy. The total opposite of that narrative, mystical, oh, in the last minute he whispered the secret, or I don't know, no? It's tragic, but, you know, the tragic is the lesson is very sad that, you know, we are free and open. There is no guarantee. We have to read Lacan seriously. We will not get from Lacan the ultimate hint. This is the truth, no?
Because what you just said is the deathbed perspective, which is a key theme in Catholic theology. That only on the deathbed you can see your life back and realize whether your life was full and complete and led to the
But corrupted people like us know that on deathbed you lie most. No, you lie absolutely.
Not if you believe you're going to heaven. So anyway, that was wonderful. Thank you very much, Slavoj. Let me remind you again that there is no class tomorrow. There will be the extra class at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Not in this. On Friday we're going to be here again. But then on Saturday we'll move to the floor building, which is just diagonally opposite on the other side of Friday.
So again, on Friday we do sexual difference and all that stuff. He's suggesting me no questions. I agree with him.
We have 3 or 4 questions, you know, for about 15 minutes. So,
fuck you, I really didn't want questions. I wanted just to be hypocrite and to be able to say I wanted, but sorry, please, let's go on. Okay.
Okay, any questions or criticisms or semblances, appearances? Yes.
I find your comment, your defense of buying into Jung and Holliday's figure of 35 million people ruthlessly killed in the Great Leap Forward in Deng Xiaoping, and the people who have stayed in power since then. It's such an important question how we sum up the great revolutions of the last century, and we have to not be blind to their failures and shortcomings, but it's equally important that we understand what they really did accomplish and what their victories were. And to buy into these, what Badiou's, I don't always agree with him, but in this case I do, is called hair-raising stories about massacres. To buy into that so blindly I think, is a terrible mistake.
Okay, but now I ask you in a totally naive way.
Unconvincing. The idea that Yang Yushen's 1,200-page book was not suppressed by the Chinese authorities as proof of its validity seems very unconvincing to me, because the Chinese authorities, after the Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping, and from that period on, made a veritable industry of victim literature from the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. And your own point about that we shouldn't accept our enemy's definition of himself, I think also applies that we should not accept our enemy's definition of their enemies. And no one was a greater enemy of Mao and the Cultural Revolution.
I have his name, a guy who was, before this book, ordered to do an estimate of deaths. He came up to 17 million official one, but then everybody agreed, really everybody, that he simply lowered the number by taking into account only a certain very restrained official statistics. So, of course, and it's in those chaotic times, of course, the official statistics didn't work. Then you had one of those, who was that, the president of China just before Tiananmen, who was then set aside. Okay, that one. Sorry. What do you mean that I buy blindly into it? I went to China, I spoke with people who are very Maoist. The ones who informed me about this are not some Deng Xiaoping revisionists, my God. Like Wang Hui and others and so on. I spoke with them and they admit it. So, I mean, it is at the rhetorical level, I agree with you. But please show me another set of arguments and so on. As far as I know, there were 2 attempts. I know the story here, you know, I'm not bluffing. There were 2, let's say, more official attempts to tell the story. One